The problem of mentally ill people has always remained relevant throughout the history of mankind, starting from the formation of society. Nowadays, everyone in need of psychiatric care has the opportunity to turn to an appropriate specialist, which is an important achievement. Previously, however, people were deprived of this opportunity and had to put up with the lack of treatment, gradually sinking into madness. The following are touching portraits of patients in an English home for the mentally ill created in the 1870s, reminding us of how much better our modern lives have truly become. During the Victorian era, not many shelters were built in England for people without homes, so many of them were forced to wander the streets and slowly lose their minds. The number of those who ended up in such institutions grew by leaps and bounds, indicating that the level of poverty in England at that time was incredibly high. Before the Lunacy Act was passed, the mentally ill were still in prison as imprisoned criminals, and the slowly opening asylums did not solve the problem entirely. It wasn't until 1845 that the Insanity Commission was created, whose main function was to find out if a person in prison was mentally ill and needed specialized care. Under the law, counties were legally obligated to provide asylums for people with mental illness. Some insane asylum patients were real criminals. They had to be restrained by police officers or specialized devices during the shooting. In the past, almost all care for people with mental illness or learning disabilities was provided by their families. Today, we can ask for help when we feel it is needed, making life in the present much better and safer than in past centuries when this option simply wasn't available. In the asylums of the 1860s, patients were required to provide detailed information about themselves before hospitalization. Among the details required were the patient's name, sex and age, married or single, previous occupation, religious affiliation, age at the time of the first attack, duration of the illness, and whether the patient was self-destructive and dangerous. Placement in an asylum was not subject to appeal once the patient was hospitalized. However, a relative or other loved one could apply for the patient's discharge, provided that the patient was given proper care. Even though the law was well-intentioned, many people considered asylums to be prisons disguised as hospitals. Wealthy people often used private insane asylums as a way to get rid of their wives, or as a convenient way to remove the poor and terminally ill from society. Although many patients were hospitalized for short periods of time, there are many stories of people who were institutionalized in insane asylums for 20 years or more. Sadly, some patients left the world within the walls of asylums without ever being released into the community. Almost all admission decisions seemed to be based on personal judgment and were heavily biased against women. Women were often held in greater numbers than men in these institutions.